Today, we're looking at a brown ink by Bookbingers, the Eastern Brown Snake. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so that if you're in a hurry, you can skip around, but if you got the time, check out the entire video. Also, if you're interested, you can follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here, I would invite you to subscribe. I do a new ink review daily. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Pierre Cardin President with a medium nib, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take the notes for this video. In order to have a standardization in my writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper, although I do use more papers, and those will show up later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine, where we get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no real shading. The extra fine is just a tad lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen. There is spots of shading, spots where it looks more red than brown, more brown than red. Like, look at the word brown, look at what's going on in the F of Fox. 11 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen. The shading between red to brown and back to red and what have you here is much better than up here. 13 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows no color variation, although we do get some there. The medium, far left to far right, you see that red and then it quickly goes to brown. That's much more what we're getting in the writing. Tomoe River. With no bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 16 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 22 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show no color variation, and we didn't get it. And Rhodia, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. There is light pepperings of darker letters that does occur within this writing. 12 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen. Still we get peppering of darker letters throughout the writing, especially look at how dark the word the is right in the middle. 15 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both shows no color variation, although we do get nice pepperings in both of the writings. I agree with Vita that we learn a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And this is a very interesting chromatography and shows us where this shading is really coming from. We see this very, very kind of light purple on the bottom, and it's pushing its way up, and we get what looks like a very dark burnt orange. And at the very, very top, we have this kind of highlighter blue. And that's where we're getting all of this shading from. The brown is from the purple and orange, and the shading comes from that highlighter blue at the top. Now the one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and this reveals a lot. What we see is that light purple that was at the bottom is actually much darker a purple. It was just spread out. There's not as much of it. As we move up, we do not have a dark burnt orange. We do have a darker orange, but not a burnt orange. And then above that, we see a little bit more of that highlighter blue. This has been a very telling chromatography. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, the blowout in the capital H would probably stop me from using it in a note-taking situation if I wanted to highlight, although for the most part I can really read what was there. Now, water's lifting all those dark tones. It's even lifting a lot of that purple that was on the bottom. We are starting to see the very beginnings of the white of the paper coming through. Water's all that it took for it to get out of my pen. This is a very well-behaved ink in that way. Now, Pen Flush seems to be doing a little bit less than water did. We see some of the brown still there, and we see that it's breaking up, but it's not going away as much as the water. The good news is it only took water to get it out of my pen. The 1/3 bleach solution is completely removing it from the paper, but you're not going to need that for cleaning.
For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with a realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Now I'm going to link the video that shows how I do my testing and calculations.
Bookbingers Eastern Brown Snake has a viscosity of 1.89, making it a wet ink.
To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those, and what I found is the average dry time is 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds.
Bookbingers Eastern Brown Snake has an average dry time of 15 seconds, so even though it's a wet ink, its dry time is normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Bookbingers Eastern Brown Snake, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. So I went with a nice turquoise from Colorverse, Morningstar. The second writing sample is done on P. Berger, Levenger, and black and red paper. Here we're looking at P. Berger, a very nice French ruled student grade paper that is not very nice with this ink. A lot of bleeding, which leads to tremendous amount of ghosting. A couple of these did spot through on the other side, but only tiny spots onto the other page, but you can't use the back of this paper. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. Extra fine is a tad lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 4 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 5 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any. Strathmore writing paper to be specific, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. There is some shading that you can see, especially when you look at the fact that over is a much lighter word than the word brown or the word quick, but over shows shading throughout it. So does dog. It starts much lighter on the left and works its way darker, so it is there. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both shows no color variation, although the extra fine does have some. And black and red notebooks with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 5 seconds to dry. Medium, by far the darkest tone on the page, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine does show a little bit of color variation. The medium shows none, but we didn't get any in any of the writing, and that's all that I have for writing samples. So what do I think of Bookbingers Eastern Brown Snake? This is a very interesting ink on the page, and it's interesting enough that it gets the kids at work interested in what ink is going down on the page, allowing me the opportunity to corrupt the minds of the youth with fountain pens and inks. Watch out. What nib and pen give the best writing experience with this ink? While I managed to get good shading with just about every pen, I would say avoid your gushers of a pen because they are going to eat up the shading that this brown ink has to offer, which is really nice. If you've made it this far and you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I'm going to remind you to subscribe. Thanks for watching.